Hey, you're going to love this interview with Andrew Gazdecki. He has sold two of his own companies for millions of dollars, and now he's founding a platform, Micro-Acquire, that is not only doing more than $250,000 of revenue itself, but helping hundreds of small businesses get bought and sold. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Going Deep with Aaron Watson. You're going deep.
Andrew, welcome on the podcast, man. I'm excited to be speaking with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
So I want to start off with the company that you're working on now, and then we can kind of talk about how you got into such an interesting business. But I signed up to be a member of MicroAcquire, and I've just kind of been, getting more into the different documents that you've created of the how-tos of buying these small companies and just how easy it is to kind of sort through and consume everything. But maybe as a starting point, to build a platform that more or less anyone could go and acquire a business, buy a business. Where did that idea come from, and what gap did you see in the market that otherwise wasn't being occupied?
Yeah, definitely. Good question. So before I started MicroAcquire, I was actually looking to buy a SaaS company myself. And so this was after I had sold my second company. I didn't want to start from the beginning. I felt my strengths are, in sales, marketing, branding, that's what I enjoy doing the most. I love the, 0 to 1, taking something from nothing and building it into something like I did with MicroAcquire. But yeah, I was looking to buy a SaaS company, and I kind of looked around at, the typical spots in the space, and there was nothing specific to SaaS. There was nothing that specifically, put founders first. I think that's one thing that I try to do at MicroAcquire. And honestly, I didn't think it was going to work too. So that's probably another thing to add. I keep a journal, and before I launched it, I was like, I don't know if this is going to work, but it looks really cool. So if it doesn't, whatever. But yeah, I just was scratching a personal itch. I just thought, selling a company is such a confusing thing for founders. No one really talks about it. It's all this gated information, for buyers and brokers to explain to you. It's just confusing. And so I thought, there's all these middlemen in the marketplace taking huge commissions. And anytime there's a middleman in a market, that's a market waiting to be disrupted. So if you wear a suit and you're taking commission and connecting two people, someone is probably going to figure out a way to make that more efficient. So long story short, just, scratching a personal itch. I saw it has a fun way to work with startups. I love working with entrepreneurs. Just kind of launched it. And, I'm pretty surprised at the response.
Yeah, we can talk. 1 year in, you're already over 240,000 in annual revenue. But the thing that I want to hone in on there, because the middleman idea, the just kind of confusing nature of something like this, the internet in certain ways has come for, and software has come for all of these illegible purchases. And you think about the stuff that's on the later end of that transaction, it is the stuff that, fewer and fewer people even have the likelihood or the consideration to do. And the type of transactions that people are doing infrequently in their lives. It was very quick to buy, books or bubble gum or easy transactions on the internet because of the fact that, people do it with regularity. You can kind of quickly iterate on actually buying it that way sucked. I'll try a different way the next time. But something like buying a business doesn't happen that often, right?
Well, it depends on who you are. If you're a private equity firm, some firms are buying, 2 to 3 companies a month. But for the average person, no, 4 or 5 years ago. So I started a company called Bizness Apps when I was in college. And, at that time, when you thought of acquisitions, you thought of Facebook and Google, that's who acquired companies. But I think what we're seeing now is this new trend of people realizing that, buying a business with existing customers is almost like a new form of entrepreneurship. And I think that trend's just going to continue. And I think that's been, helpful for MicroAcquire's growth. But Yeah, I think, there's just been a lot of people sharing, really awesome success stories of, hey, I bought a few companies and look how well I'm doing. And that fascinates people because they're not Google, they're not Apple, they're just regular people and they're building these, empires full of, interesting companies. Um, so I hope that answers your question, but yeah, it's fascinating to me just at the types of people that are now buying companies compared to, what you'd see like 4 or 5 years ago when it was just Mark Zuckerberg buying Instagram or something like that. Now it's, a VP of sales at a company and he wants to own or she wants to own 100% of the company instead of a tenth of 1% at best over 4 years or something like that. So it's definitely, I think it's going to be interesting to see over the next few years, but I'm confident saying acquisitions are just going to become more and more common, whether you're, thinking about starting a business that's a viable route, buy a business and, have something in place to start off and grow with. Or just strategic companies as well, looking to bolt on other services that they can sell to their companies. And then people starting, different private equity funds. I've never seen so much action in that space. So yeah, it's just interesting all around. There's just a lot of activity.
So can you talk a little bit about the business model that you play as the marketplace? And also, the name's MicroAcquire. It kind of suggests that there's some sort of upper threshold or limit to the size of a business that would be transacted on your platform. Can you talk about those two?
Yeah, definitely. So the original thesis of the business was typical private equity looks for businesses usually 10 million and above. And that's like a financial buyer. And then you have strategic acquirers that would be, again, Google. I'm going to throw in some other names: Tesla, HubSpot. Those are strategic acquirers, and they typically want, not all the time, but they do want to see some sort of scale. So like 5 million in revenue. And so what I saw as a void in the market was, companies below that revenue threshold don't have a lot of optionality in terms of exit strategy or meeting buyers quickly without going through this whole process that might not even work out. And then if it does, they got to pay this commission. So that was, kind of the initial thought of framing it. Micro is, there's just a lot of businesses where if you're an investment banker, it's just as much work to do, 20, 40, $50 million transaction than it is to do, $1 or $2 million transaction. And in terms of how I'm currently making money with MicroAcquire, so I just have a premium subscription for buyers. It allows them to actually contact the sellers. So it's completely free for founders, no commissions, no exclusivity clauses or anything. You can list your startup, meet buyers. If you sell, great. If you don't and you want to keep growing it, that's awesome. Really just putting, sellers and founders and entrepreneurs in a position with buyers to have a little bit more control. And the funny part about that business model that I want to add is I didn't originally think it was going to be that. I wanted the marketplace to just, I built it as like a free resource for bootstrapping entrepreneurs and companies kind of below that, 5 million revenue threshold. But then I'd post startups on MicroAcquire and like 100 people would request information. And the original idea for MicroAcquire was to have this like super vetted marketplace where every buyer I manually approve. Every startup I still manually approve. So I look at the profile, I speak with the founder, I gather as much information as I can to, and then I'll make the profiles look good and that sort of stuff. But then thousands of people started signing up and I was clicking approve manually, just taking up all my day. And I said, okay, this thing has kind of gotten out of control. So then I basically am like reverse verifying buyers, if that makes sense. So it kind of just, solved a pain point in the marketplace where founders were just being hounded by too many people and they didn't know who to focus on. And so the premium buyer program that I rolled out, which is just a small subscription, helps founders focus on less conversations, but with more serious buyers.
And it kind of also, I imagine the reason people were getting hounded with those offers is seeing like that kind of snapshot of a business, like you can do just by signing up like I did, it's like this very fun version of window shopping, the same way you might walk down the street and be like, oh, imagine if we bought that car, or imagine if I bought that, whatever piece of apparel or clothing. It's for a certain type of mind that is interested in acquiring these type of businesses. You could just spend the time scrolling through all that stuff, and that's how you build the actual network of just general awareness for what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's kind of like a Ferrari dealership. A lot
Yeah.
of people go in a Ferrari dealership. I've done it, and I've like, told the guy, "Hey, I'm here to buy a Ferrari," and he's like, "No, you're not." The people who buy Ferraris just walk in here and point at the car. So yeah, some people just want to look, and that's why all the details of the startups are private. You don't know the company name unless the founder gives you access. But yeah, there's a lot of window shoppers, and the premium buyer program helps kind of separate those two groups: the people that are serious and the people that are just kind of looking around, so to speak.
So the other side of this is, I mean, maybe we can spend some time on the buyers, but to me, what's super interesting is the founders that want to sell, and you've been in that boat, having sold two businesses yourself. But there's a belief, particularly if you're not on some sort of like obligation because you took venture funding and you're supposed to be on some sort of ramp track to have an exit. It's always been at least positioned to me as, hey, if I've got my own SaaS that I more or less have full equity on, and I've built it to have a sufficient cash flow and team and whatever, that's kind of the dream. It should be cash flowing, it should be have solid margins and whatnot. Like, what type of characters in that price range tend to be looking to sell?
I see pretty much everything and everything. So some are, venture-backed businesses that realize they're not going to reach escape velocity, or they're not going to hit the growth milestones to hit their next fundraise, and so they need to sell the business. Or they just want to get out of the business. They want to build $1 billion company, and it's becoming apparent this isn't $1 billion opportunity. And that's still a great business. It's very different building a startup and building a business. And what's interesting is, building a business isn't sexy, and what I mean by a business is, it's profitable. You're not focused on investors. You're really focused on creating something that's sustainable. You own the majority of it. A startup is really, kind of binary. Like, you're either, going to see a huge exit, or go down swinging. And so, the best businesses on MicroAcquire are probably, a little bit in the middle, where they're, profitable SaaS companies. They have the potential to reach, say, go from 1 to 10 million in revenue or something like that. But they're not like unicorns or anything like that. They're not the next, I hate using Google and Facebook over and over and over, but those companies always come to mind. But it's a mixture of everything. There's small SaaS applications. There's Shopify applications making anywhere from 1,000 to 500,000 in revenue a year. There's venture-backed businesses that are just looking for soft landings. I've also started listing e-commerce companies and direct-to-consumer companies. I've helped marketplaces sell. There's a Clubhouse competitor on there right now. Yeah. And then, interesting enough, I posted, someone had like a Instagram account with 2 million followers, just full of dog pictures. And I was like, is this for real? And I talked to the guy who owned it. And long story short, I listed that. It sold within 24 hours. I've sold companies from, Y Combinator, from Techstars, from 500 Startups. So it's a good mix of everything. And I think it's important to understand that not every business succeeds, and that's okay. And exiting for 1, 2, even a couple $100,000 is a massive win. But unfortunately, in kind of our tech community, or mainstream press, those sort of outcomes aren't really serious. But that's like life-changing stuff right there. Even though it might not hit the headlines of TechCrunch or whatever.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about your experience having gone through those types of acquisitions. The first was Bizness Apps. It was, allowing other entities to build mobile apps, and you were kind of building, that was a SaaS solution. You're kind of building the underlying infrastructure to help them do that easily.
Yeah. So that I always say that was a distribution company more than a technology company. And the reason I say that is it was a do-yourself app builder for small and medium-sized businesses, but we didn't sell to small and medium-sized businesses. What we'd do is we would white label the software, and then we'd sell that to web agencies who had 100 small business customers, where they could just use our software, put their branding on it, set their own pricing, and then build hundreds of applications. And then we just focus on building the technology for them to build these mobile apps for their customers. And it was a crazy time too. It was like the iPhone just came out. Everyone was trying to figure out how to build a mobile app. A custom mobile app at that time was like 50 grand because it was a new technology that very few engineers knew how to develop. And so we just made that simple, easier, faster, cheaper for businesses where normally they wouldn't be able to build a mobile app like that. But yeah, the business model was we sold into mainly web agencies, partnered with some public companies, and some other really large companies that worked with small businesses. And we would just focus on the app building technology. And then we essentially had like a 5,000 person sales team across the world. We were in like 40 different countries. It translated the app in like 30 different languages. We ended up making more mobile apps than any other company in the world. I can't prove that, but I talked to an app reviewer one time, and he told us that we were putting in basically one in every 20 apps. So 5% of the total apps in the App Store were being created by Business Apps. So that was my first company, and I sold that in 2018. I started in college and only raised about 100,000.
That's bananas. And you got it to over 10 million in annual revenue.
I did.
And so, like, can you take us to the psychology of that exit? Because that was, it seems like you reached a point where, hey, I can sell this now and have genuinely life-changing money. And because I'm not under any sort of obligation from investors, I don't know exactly the terms of the 100K investment, but you had the option to do that and you were just kind of ready for the next thing, or what was the psychology there?
Yeah, I can tell you what it was like so I did, an all cash deal. So there was no earnout, there was no staggered payments or anything like that. So I remember when the wire hit, I actually got really scared. I thought it's just life changing. Like oh my gosh, because it's an event that you work towards, for 8 years. And I built that business with the goal of selling it. It wasn't a business I was going to cash flow and have a profitable business because I had investors. So I have a fiduciary duty to show them a return on their investment. And the best way to do that is through an exit or buying them out. But in this case, I was focusing on an exit. And yeah, that event happened. I got lucky, super fortunate. But yeah, it's definitely a moment that, I have like the date written down as March 24th, and it was pretty meaningful. I mean, it changed my life forever, and it's allowed me to go on and start other businesses. But I think, in a way, I kind of miss it. It was so much fun. I mean, I was 22, 23, 24, running like 100-person company. I had zero experience. I'm a non-technical founder. My previous job was at Sears. I didn't raise a bunch of venture capital, even though I met with a bunch of VCs as we were growing. So it was just an interesting, surreal, like, journey.
Fascinating. Yeah. So I'm 3 years into the company that I'm building, and it's an agency / media company at this point in time. We either sell ads on media or we're, doing different services for our clients. And what's hard for me to wrap my head around, and I basically spend all my, if I'm doing dishes, if I'm in transit anywhere, I'm listening to different podcasts with different investors and entrepreneurs talking about everything. And I heard this ridiculous stat that somewhere around 50% of entrepreneurs post selling their company regret it or have regrets about the process generally. And so it makes sense when I see like that framework of, founders first, whenever we're trying to facilitate these deals, that makes a ton of sense. But it is even fascinating, like the way you mentioned that in describing the psychology of like, you do kind of miss it. And it was a kind of special experience with that company that you were building. And I just think it's fascinating that, that happens. And then you're just literally right on to the next one, right on the next one after that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think a lot of founders go through that. I talked to, a few friends with exits that, yeah, you sell the company and you have this team that like you just love working with. And it depends on the terms of like your deal. Like, is there earnout? Is it going to be a period of time? But mine was quick. And so, we had this family like culture and, it was almost like graduating college where everyone was super happy. It was a great outcome all around. But it was like the end of a chapter. So, I kept telling the team like, hey, this isn't goodbye. It's just, see you around. And so, yeah, it definitely, you look back and you just think, that was a hell of a ride. But, on the flip note, I see entrepreneurs holding on to businesses too long as well. And that can be detrimental to your career. If you have something of value and you have an opportunity to secure financial stability for the rest of your life, I highly recommend it. I have absolutely zero regrets. The only thing I miss is, working with my team and, but I've been able to move on and meet other awesome individuals and build other awesome teams. So, I like to think of my career as just chapters. That was an amazing chapter. I've had a few after that. I'm in a new one now. But, when you build a company and you exit it, you're now able to go and do something new with so much more experience than you had before. When I started Business Apps, I had no idea what I was doing. Absolutely no idea. Like, we were updating code on like the production server. We would like push bugs live and like, just stuff that I wouldn't do now because I have gone through some painful mistakes. I've made more mistakes than things I've done right. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's like a double-edged sword. You can hold on to the business, but with technology companies, you're just going to get out innovated. So you're not going to hand this down to your kid or something like that. Someone else is going to think of a better, faster, cheaper way of doing whatever you're doing. So there's kind of like the technology adoption curve. You want to make sure you sell when you feel like you've taken the business as far as you can go, and that's where I was, and that's when I sold. So no regrets, but looking back, yeah, it was so much fun.
So let me ask that because the next company, so Business Apps, it was a little over 8 years from inception to the eventual sale. Your next one, Altcoin.io, turned around really quickly, in less than 2 years from at least from trust in LinkedIn, from inception to sale. And you talk about all that experience that you have. You've made all these mistakes. You're coming with like a tighter, you're not someone with like a huge binder in your playbook. You're like, okay, these are the 15 plays that work, and like this is what I'm gonna hang my hat on. But I have to imagine the other side of it too is just the confidence. Like in the first year of starting Piper, I was like, there was just genuine, like, I don't know if this will work. And the stakes felt so high because I had never made something work before. Right. Imagine after that, you have both financial security, but also the security of like, hey, I've done it. And maybe that's not a license to get overconfident, but it's a license to be more confident that I can really create something valuable.
Yeah, so you're reading it wrong, and I'll tell
Okay.
you why. So altcoin was a completely different industry, and once again, I had no idea what I was doing because it was a blockchain company, and I like to be uncomfortable. I like to learn. I like to kind of do startups on like hard mode, if that makes sense. I mean, I could probably build different companies, like maybe something similar to Business Apps where I have like deep domain knowledge, but I love to learn. I love to kind of be like, how are we going to figure this out? Like, so with Altcoin, what we were building was a decentralized cryptocurrency trading exchange, but we were building it with a framework called Plasma, which increases the transaction time for trading tokens on the Ethereum blockchain. Kind of confusing, super, super complicated technical project. So being a non-technical founder, I mean, that just wrapping my head around that was difficult. But yeah, that one is a little different. The plays that I ran a little bit earlier that I think benefited me was I mapped out all the potential strategic buyers. And so once we got to a point where, we felt we had built something of value and that, this is a sellable asset, We already had built relationships with everyone that could potentially be interested in buying the company. And then that's why it was such a quick acquisition is from day one, I had meetings with everyone. It was basically like I started the company as an opportunity, seeing it like a puzzle piece. Like this puzzle piece would fit really well into a larger cryptocurrency company or crypto holding company. And so we built basically a core trading engine, and that's what we sold.
Interesting. So would you say that you've started MicroAcquire similarly? Like you kind of said at the beginning, like you didn't even know if it would necessarily work or if there would be that appetite for it. But is this something where the intention is like I already kind of know who would want something like this, or what was the framework there?
I think what I always look for is I always look for trends. So I look for what is not obvious today that will become obvious over time. So with business apps, that was to me, it was extremely obvious that every business is going to want a way to connect with their customers where they are, and that's on their mobile phones. Similar to their, larger competitors, like a small coffee shop is going to want to build the same type of app as Starbucks, except they don't have 5 million bucks. So that one was obvious to me. Like, everyone's going to have one of these mobile phones in their pocket. So I made a bet on that early. With altcoin, I think I was a little too early on that one. I think blockchain development and just the use cases that we're going to see with blockchain are going to get really interesting over the next few years. But right now, developing something in blockchain right now kind of feels like working with the internet in 2000. So, the user experience is lacking in a big way. So for mainstream adoption to kind of catch up, there's a lot of work to be done there. And so we focus on that a lot. But I kind of realized it was going to take a while for this to really become a big business. And so that's why it made sense to sell that one so early. With MicroAcquire, again, the bet I was making was, there's a lot of startup founders and they have no idea how an acquisition works. This market is controlled by, investment bankers and brokers that favor buyers over the founders. And so I wanted to flip that market on its head, remove the middleman, and just make a bet that, there's a lot of startups that are never going to get past 5 million in revenue, and they're going to want an easy way to create these relationships with buyers without the typical headaches you see today. And
to put a pause really quickly on the idea that, it favored the buyers over the founders. A big reason for that is the buyers are the repeat customer. So that's who the middleman kind of tailors the experience towards, as opposed to the one-off sale of founders. Is that right?
well, so if you're a broker or an investment banker, you're paid a big commission if the deal closes. So there's a lot of discussion behind the scenes of, hey, I talked to the founder and I'm pretty sure you can get him at this price and stuff like that. I mean, there's a definite place for investment bankers. I use an investment bank to sell business apps. If the business is, if you're really, dealing with, 8 figures and above, investment banks and a professional M&A advisor, I highly recommend. And there's some great brokers as well, but, you get a prospectus from a broker and the market's growing, everything's great. So you almost have to like reverse due diligence what they're saying. Like everything is so good, you got to figure out what's wrong with it. So it's a different type of due diligence. And on MicroAcquire, just you connect directly with the founder, and you're able to ask questions directly without kind of a coach sort of set of answers from someone in the middle. But yeah, I mean, when you got to think of incentives. Incentives drive, human behavior essentially. And when you're incentivized to sell a business, if it sells for, let's say 1.5 million as opposed to, 1.8 million, like as a broker, you're probably okay with that. But that's a significant difference for a founder because you just want to get the deal closed and move on to the next one. But again, I mean, brokers and bankers definitely have their spot, but I just felt there could be a more efficient process here.
So it's clear that the solution works. You're facilitating transactions And at the very least, the buyer, they're a qualified buyer. So you shared that 240,000 in annual revenue year one. You've got more than 30,000 buyers, not all paying, but the like window shoppers like me included. And then this is still a one-man band. Like there's not a team built around it.
Yeah, it's just again, I like to play startups on on hard mode. I should
Clearly.
probably, this is another thing that I'm doing wrong is I'm currently hiring, so don't worry about me. I'm gonna get my time back. But yeah, right now I'm kind of doing everything. I do all the support. I write all the newsletters. If you go on live chat, you're talking to me. If you submit your startup, and I think that component will probably always stay, just because I truly believe that, when you build a brand and you're able to, involve the founder, there's just something special that happens, and you build such amazing customer loyalty and customer affinity. And so I did that at Business Apps. If you look at like our G2 reviews and just search like CEO, you'll see a ton of people mentioning like Andrew. Like I would do support emails even at Business Apps, even when we had like a big support team. I take sales calls all the time. So I really enjoy, working closely with whatever customer I'm serving. But yeah, man, it's I mean, candidly, I have an agency and development team that I hired for the development of the marketplace. I have some contractors that help me with, SEO, Facebook ads, little things, but the overall operations, yeah, it's me basically, 5 a.m. to 8 p.m.
And so that's also an informed choice because you've run that 100-person team of Business Apps, and not that you could be 100 on that number, but you could be hiring as opposed to using agencies. What's the learning there that's, led you to say this is the route as opposed to a route I've taken in the past?
I think it's important before you hire anybody to really, really understand the role and how to optimize the processes for that role. So the amount of work I do with MicroAcquire, like it would take 5 people, but I built really, really streamlined processes through, templated responses to common questions, or just streamlining onboarding startups, just every part of the business. I look for ways to just cut down time because that also builds a better user experience. And then when I start to deeply understand, what the best way is for this role. So the best example I can give now that's relevant is, onboarding startups. So I have a very detailed process of how that goes, what information is required, how to set up the profiles, which startups are a viable fit for MicroAcquire. And so now that I can hand over to someone, which I'm currently working on now. I've hired 2 different team members, and literally after this call, I have training with after this podcast, excuse me, I'm training with someone. So just learning the ins and outs of your industry and the processes and just what you need out of whoever you hire, I think is key. And that can be applied to bigger roles too. Like if you're in B2B SaaS, I'm a firm believer that the founder should be doing sales to, a certain point. So they deeply understand the sales process. They deeply understand their customer. They have their, ICP nailed down, setting the initial brand. Like what is the company? Is it a fun brand? Is it a humorous brand? Is it a serious brand? That's a reflection of the founder. And so, I think it's a mistake sometimes in founders. Like they'll have an idea, they raise money. Next thing you know, you got a VP of sales, VP of marketing, all these smart people kind of sitting in the room. I think you should, kind of, build the business out a little bit more and really have yourself in the trenches. And because it allows you to say, when you really start to build out your team, there's no job that you haven't done in the business. And that is just huge there. And if you make it true, it resonates with your team. Like I've done the job you're doing. I know how to do it. I can help you do it. And it just builds a culture of just, leading from the front. And so, yeah, that's kind of why I'm wearing all the hats right now.
So in terms of growth, though, that's one of the jobs you've clearly, obviously had your finger on the pulse of. To get that many people on the platform in a year, you referenced Facebook ads, you referenced SEO. Is that what you would like? Can you give a breakdown of how much you think those different elements contributed to the growth of the platform?
Candidly, I'm making a small mistake where I need to button up my attribution in terms of like where, like right
Okay.
now I'm in a situation where everything's working and I'm just not touching anything. So I can see like, where users are coming from, but I see a lot of signups from Product Hunt, Indie Hacker, Beta List, tons on socials, tons from LinkedIn and Twitter, and a lot of just referrals too. Just being able to speak to, buyers and seeing this word of mouth flywheel start to take place is pretty interesting. But that's on my to-do list, is kind of button down exact attribution on where exactly are my customers coming from. Right now, I just have like scattered marketing campaigns. I do a lot of stuff on social. I talk to a lot of buyers and I kind of let them know, like, if you run into a startup and you think MicroAcquire could be a fit, I'd love to be introduced. Um, so I'd say the main drivers is word of mouth. I think that's been, if I pull up Google Analytics, the direct traffic is probably 70%, and then maybe 15% referral, and then 10 on organic, and then 5 on social, if I'm guessing.
Fascinating. Yeah, because it's impressive. Like that's, what's the trope? It's, the first time founder, worries about the product, and the second time founder worries about the distribution. And I can see that clearly just 3 months into what we're doing, but it's very clear that like if you get the distribution and then you're able to populate the people on the platform, even if the product's not quite right and there's stuff that needs to be added or iterated on, you're going to get the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and the tip I give to other founders too, and just kind of like the playbook that I'm running, and it's definitely a scrappy move, but I like a shotgun approach at first, where you just start doing a bunch of stuff, like everything all at once. Ads, display ads, Facebook ads, social media posts, anything you think of that could possibly reach customers, and then start to really figure out which ones of those to focus on most, and then just double down on like 2 and 3 and get really, really focused.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Well, Andrew, this has been great. I appreciate you sharing so much of what you're working on with me. Before we aim towards asking the last 2 questions that we always do, is there anything else you're hoping to share that I just didn't give you a chance to?
No, it's been a ton of fun, man. Appreciate you having me on. And what else can I share? I passed, as we've been talking, there's been 2 customers that signed up. So I think I passed 250,000 in annual recurring revenue on this podcast, which is kind of cool.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we'll have to have you on after that number is way, way bigger to celebrate and teach us more about what you learned.
I'm into it. I'll do it.
For folks that want to check it out, join the 30,000 other buyers looking at businesses or potentially sell their own company. What digital coordinates should we provide people if they want to learn more?
Just go to microacquire.com or follow me, Gazdecki, on Twitter. Also add me on LinkedIn, or just shoot me an email, andrew@microacquire.com.
Right on. We're going to link all that in the show notes for this episode. You can find it in the podcast app where you're listening to this, or at goingdeepwithaaron.com/podcast for every single episode of the show. But before we let you go, Andrew, I want to give you the mic one final time to issue an actionable personal challenge for the audience.
I would say one thing that's always been really helpful for me is journaling and writing down your goals. It's just really, I have a whiteboard right here that has, my goals on it, personally and professionally. And I walk in this office every morning and that's the first thing I see. And then, think about journaling. And when I say journaling, I don't mean, write about like your life story every single day, but once a month, do bullet points of, what happened, the summary, where do you think you're going to be in 30 days, and turn that into a book. That's exactly what I literally did. I journaled my entire experience through Bizness Apps, and now I'm turning that into a book. But it helps you so much when you're having a bad month and you look at, if I read a post from December, it says, I'm launching MicroAcquire. I don't even know if this is going to work. And I read that now, it puts everything into perspective. Like, this is awesome. Enjoy the moment, enjoy the journey. So long story short, write your goals down and maybe keep a monthly journal.
Yeah. I have a good friend who is an investor, and he was talking about how his recommendation was to journal during like the beginning of the pandemic. So I was like calling him because he had kind of, just been a little bit earlier to the expectation, like, hey, this is gonna be a big deal before other people were saying that. And he was saying, just take a journal of like all the things you're feeling right now, because it is a very, very scary, very sad time, but also very like special in the sense out of the ordinary time, so that you can look back on how you were even just dealing with those new stimulus, and once you have some space from it, be able to process it better. Because it's hard to even remember. Like, it's hard to even look back if you didn't have an asset like that and be like, I could make something up what I was feeling, but I don't really know.
Yeah, I think the takeaway I have there is just when you write stuff down like that, March was really scary, and then when you look back, it gives you just a little bit of hope and confidence. Like everything tends to work out most of the time. So, definitely documenting like the hard times, and then when the good times are good, it makes you just feel, it puts it into perspective just how lucky you are. And so I'm a huge fan of journaling, so I highly recommend it.
Facts. Well, that's a beautiful note to wrap up on, Andrew. Thanks for coming on the podcast, man.
Yeah, Aaron, thanks for having me.
We just went deep with Andrew Gazdecki. Hope everyone out there has a fantastic day. Hey, thanks for watching to the end of my interview with Andrew. If you enjoyed it, check out our past interview with Ryan Culp. He has bought and sold a ton of small businesses himself and created a course that educates others on how to do so.